The words hung in the conference room air like a toxic gas. I sat across from Caleb Vance, the new CEO of Nexora Therapeutics, a man nearly 20 years my junior. Different direction, I repeated, my voice steadier than I expected. Caleb adjusted his designer tie, not quite meeting my eyes. The board feels the research division needs fresh leadership, someone with innovative approaches. I almost laughed. I had developed Neurovance, the drug that had taken Nexora from a struggling company to a biotech powerhouse, generating over $2 billion annually. I understand, I said calmly. What does the transition look like? Caleb pushed a thin folder across the table. Your severance package. The legal team has outlined everything. It's standard. I opened it, scanned the numbers, and felt my stomach tighten. After 15 years and billions in revenue, they were offering me 12 weeks of salary and continued health benefits for 3 months. It was insulting. I see, I said, closing the folder. When would you like me to finish? Today would be best, he said. Human resources can help you pack for security reasons. That won't be necessary. I can clear my desk myself. Claudia, he said, this isn't personal, just business. I turned back and smiled. Of course, business. My name is Claudia Benson, and until today, I was the Senior Director of Pharmaceutical Research at Nexora Therapeutics in Stamford, Connecticut. I had dedicated my life to the company, working weekends, missing family events, because I believed in what we were doing. As I walked back to my office, colleagues watched me with concerned expressions. News traveled fast. 15 years of breakthroughs ended in a 5-minute meeting, but Caleb didn't know I had prepared for this months ago. In the pharmaceutical industry, you learn to anticipate side effects. It wasn't always like this at Nexora. When I joined in 2008, we were a scrappy team, passionate about neurological treatments. Howard Jameson, the founder, created a culture where science came first. He used to say, solve the problems and the profits will follow. And he was right. Then came Neurovance. I still remember the night I saw the data. It was midnight, and I was alone in the lab. The compound showed unprecedented effectiveness in treating depression with minimal side effects. I called Howard at home. This could change everything, I told him. It did. Neurovance received FDA approval, and within 2 years, it became one of the most prescribed antidepressants in the country. Nexora's stock soared. Howard retired 3 years ago, and that's when things began to shift. The board brought in finance people and marketers. They talked about leveraging synergies and maximizing shareholder value. The research team still had respect, but increasingly, decisions were made with quarterly earnings in mind, not scientific advancement. Then came Caleb Vance, headhunted from a larger company. I tried to work with him. I presented our latest breakthrough, Neurovance XR, an extended-release version of the drug. Impressive, Caleb said, but I could see in his eyes that he wasn't fully grasping the scientific significance. How quickly can we get this to market? He asked. We need to complete the final trial phases, I explained. Patents? He frowned. Those take too long. Can we expedite? That should have been my warning. The next week, Caleb brought in consultants to evaluate the research division. They asked strange questions. I called my attorney, Victoria West. Something feels off, I said. I've developed a compound that could be worth billions, but I'm getting signals that my position isn't secure. Victoria agreed to help. Victoria didn't mince words. Nexora owns your work, she said. Anything you develop as an employee belongs to them. That's standard. I know that, I replied, stirring my coffee. We were meeting at a quiet cafe several towns away from Stamford, away from any prying eyes. But the legal team has been dragging their feet on filing the patent for Neurovance XR. It's been sitting on their desks for months. Victoria looked thoughtful. That's either incompetence or strategy. Neither is good for you. What can I do? I asked, the weight of the situation settling heavily on my chest. Victoria leaned forward, a glint of determination in her eyes. Tell me about your employment contract. Any specific clauses about intellectual property? I handed her a copy of the contract. She reviewed it carefully, then stopped at one section. Her eyebrow raised slightly. This is interesting, she said. Your contract stipulates that inventions belong to Nexora if they're developed using company resources or during company time. Exactly, I said. It's all theirs. Not necessarily, Victoria replied, tapping the document. Have you done any work on this compound at home? Used your personal equipment? Worked on weekends or after hours when you weren't officially on the clock? I thought back. All the time. I have a home lab set up for theoretical work. I've spent countless weekends and nights refining the molecular structure before bringing it to the official lab. Victoria smiled. And I assume you've documented this? Lab notebooks? Time-stamped computer files? Of course, I replied. I'm a scientist. Documentation is second nature. Then we might have something, she said, leaning forward. You could arguably claim that the initial conception and significant development occurred outside company time, using personal resources. But the final testing was at Nexora, yes. But the core intellectual breakthrough, the patent-worthy innovation, you could claim happened on your own time. I was skeptical. Would that hold up? It's not airtight, but it creates a gray area. Enough to file a competing patent application as an individual inventor, Victoria explained. And sometimes a gray area is all you need to create leverage. The idea felt both exhilarating and terrifying. Wouldn't that be considered unethical? Victoria's face softened. Is it ethical for them to delay filing a patent on your work while possibly planning to remove you? Companies protect themselves all the time. This is you doing the same. After another hour of discussion, we formulated a plan. Victoria would help me establish a personal intellectual property holding company. I would document all my independent work on the compound and file a patent application through my new entity. If Nexora kept me on and properly filed their patent, I would assign my rights to them. If not, well, I'd have insurance. For the next few weeks, I lived a double life at Nexora. I was the same dedicated research director I'd always been. But at home, I meticulously documented my independent contributions to Neurovance XR and prepared the patent filing. The day Victoria confirmed that our application had been submitted to the United States Patent and Trademark Office, I felt a strange mixture of relief and guilt. I told myself it was just protection, a safety net I would hopefully never need to use. 1 week later, I was called into that fateful meeting with Caleb Vance. Victoria didn't mince words. Nexora owns your work, she said. Anything you develop as an employee belongs to them. That's standard. I know that, I replied, stirring my coffee. We were meeting at a quiet cafe a few towns away from Stanford, away from any prying eyes. But the legal team has been dragging their feet on filing the patent for Neurovance XR. It's been sitting on their desks for months. Victoria thought for a moment. That's either incompetence or strategy. Neither is good for you. What can I do? I asked, the weight of the situation starting to settle. She leaned in, her voice dropping slightly. Tell me about your employment contract. Any specific clauses about intellectual property? I handed her a copy of the contract. She reviewed it carefully before stopping at one section. This is interesting, she said, pointing at the text. Your contract stipulates that inventions belong to Nexora if they're developed using company resources or during company time. Exactly, I said. It's all theirs. Not necessarily, Victoria replied, tapping the document. Have you done any work on this compound at home? Used your personal equipment? Worked on weekends or after hours? I thought back. All the time. I have a home lab set up for theoretical work. I've spent countless weekends and nights refining the molecular structure before bringing it to the official lab. Victoria smiled. And I assume you've documented this? Lab notebooks? Time-stamped computer files? Of course, I replied. I'm a scientist. Documentation is second nature. Then we might have something, she said, leaning forward. You could arguably claim that the initial conception and significant development occurred outside company time, using personal resources. But the final testing was at Nexora. Yes, but the core intellectual breakthrough, the patent-worthy innovation, you could claim happened on your own time. I was skeptical. Would that hold up? It's not airtight, but it creates a gray area, Victoria explained. Enough to file a competing patent application as an individual inventor, and sometimes a gray area is all you need to create leverage. The idea felt both exhilarating and terrifying. Wouldn't that be considered unethical? Victoria's face softened. Is it ethical for them to delay filing a patent on your work while possibly planning to remove you? Companies protect themselves all the time. This is you doing the same. After another hour of discussion, we formulated a plan. Victoria would help me establish a personal intellectual property holding company. I would document all my independent work on the compound and file a patent application through my new entity. If Nexora kept me on and properly filed their patent, I would assign my rights to them. If not, I'd have insurance. For the next few weeks, I lived a double life at Nexora. I was the same dedicated research director I'd always been, but at home, I meticulously documented my independent contributions to Neurovance XR and prepared the patent filing. The day Victoria confirmed that our application had been submitted to the United States Patent and Trademark Office, I felt a strange mixture of relief and guilt. I told myself it was just protection, a safety net I would hopefully never need to use. 1 week later, I was called into that fateful meeting with Caleb Vance. I walked into the meeting with Caleb feeling a strange calmness. I knew exactly what I was about to do, and there was no turning back. I had spent the last few weeks meticulously preparing for this moment, and now the pieces were falling into place. Caleb didn't waste any time. He looked up from his desk as I entered, his face tense but trying to maintain an air of authority. "Claudia," he began, his voice dripping with condescension, "I hope you've had time to think about the severance package. We just want this to go as smoothly as possible." I sat down across from him, folding my hands on the table. "I've reviewed it," I said calmly, "and I've made some adjustments." Caleb's brow furrowed, and he glanced at the papers I had placed on the table. A counteroffer, carefully crafted by Victoria and me. "What is this?" he asked, as though the idea of me having any say in this process was beyond his comprehension. "A counteroffer," I replied, "that includes more reasonable compensation for my years of service, as well as a retention of certain intellectual property rights related to Neurovance XR. He chuckled dismissively. "Claudia, you developed Neurovance while employed here. Any derivatives or improvements belong to Nexora. You know that." I didn't flinch. "That's a complex legal question," I said. "My contract specifies that anything developed during company time using company resources belongs to Nexora. But," I continued, "I've kept meticulous records of when and where the work was performed." His face tightened as he processed my words. "What are you implying?" he asked, his voice barely controlled. "Nothing," I replied. "Just that I'm not the only one who has worked on Neurovance XR. I developed the core idea on my own time, in my own lab, using my own equipment. I have the documentation to prove it." Caleb's jaw clenched. "We can fight this," he said, leaning back in his chair. "Our legal team will crush you." I smiled. "You can try. But you'll have to prove it in court, and I'm fairly certain our legal teams will be spending more on litigation than the additional severance I'm requesting. And that's assuming you win." There was a long silence as Caleb processed my words. He pushed my counteroffer aside. "I'll need to discuss this with the board," he said flatly. "In the meantime, we're proceeding with the announcement of Neurovance XR next week." I stood up, gathering my papers. "I look forward to hearing from you." As I walked out of his office, I felt a rush of satisfaction. Not because I had won yet, but because I had made my move. The game was on, and now it was up to Nexora to play their hand. The following days played out like a well-rehearsed drama, and the stakes were rising. I watched from the sidelines as Caleb and Nexora's board scrambled to contain the fallout. It was clear they hadn't anticipated anyone challenging their authority, least of all me. But I wasn't about to back down. The press release announcing Neurovance XR as the next big thing from Nexora went out on a Tuesday morning. The media hailed it as a groundbreaking achievement in depression treatment, projecting it would double the company's revenue by 2026. The stock jumped 12%, analysts upgraded their ratings, and business news outlets showcased Caleb as the visionary leader who was taking Nexora to the next level. I watched it all unfold from my home office, feeling oddly detached. The story of my departure, of my groundbreaking work being claimed by others, went unnoticed. But I knew the truth. Neurovance XR was mine. It had always been mine. That afternoon, Victoria called. "Have you seen the announcement?" she asked, her voice sharp. "They're claiming they own the IP." "Yes," I replied, though I wasn't surprised, "and they'll soon find out they're wrong." Victoria's voice softened. "The USPTO is publishing the patent applications on Thursday." I paused. "Including mine?" "Yes, and since your filing was submitted first, it will be clear who has priority." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. What happens then? Victoria hesitated. Well, either they realize the situation and approach us to negotiate, or they try to fight it and accuse you of stealing company IP. Which one do you think it will be with someone like Caleb Vance? I didn't even need to think about it. He'll fight. His ego won't allow anything else. And she was right. The day after the USPTO published the patent applications revealing that Claudia Benson, not Nexora, had filed first for Neurovance XR, my phone exploded. Calls, messages, and emails flooded in from every corner of the pharmaceutical world. I ignored them all except for Victoria's. It's happening, she said simply. Nexora's stock dropped 24% today. They've issued a statement claiming you misappropriated company intellectual property. I had expected that. Anything else? Victoria paused before continuing. I've received calls from 3 different pharmaceutical companies. They want to discuss licensing Neurovance XR from you. Now that I hadn't expected. So quickly, too. Verdant Pharmaceuticals, Meridian Healthcare, and Terran Biotech, all major players in the industry, were offering terms that could make me very wealthy. I took a deep breath, trying to stay grounded. Let's not rush into anything. What's happening with Nexora? They're in crisis mode, Victoria said. The board has called an emergency meeting. Word is Caleb is in the hot seat. I felt a small twinge of satisfaction, but I quickly pushed it aside. This wasn't about revenge. It was about fairness, about being valued properly for my work. The tension was palpable when I walked into Nexora's headquarters for what was supposed to be a resolution meeting. After the whirlwind of press releases, stock drops, and media frenzy, the company had no choice but to act. I could feel the weight of the situation in the air. The last remnants of their arrogance had crumbled under the reality of the situation. Caleb's departure seemed imminent. I arrived early, a sense of calm settling over me. I wasn't there for vindication. I was there to secure what was rightfully mine. The door to the boardroom swung open, and I was escorted inside by Eleanor Fitzgerald, Nexora's board chair. The room was full, 8 people sitting around the polished table, including Howard Jameson, who had returned as interim CEO. The room was quiet as I took my seat, and Caleb's absence was noticeable. He hadn't arrived yet, and I knew that was a bad sign. The board members shifted uncomfortably, glancing at one another. This wasn't the confident, assertive Nexora I had known. Eleanor began. Dr. Benson, thank you for meeting with us today. The board finds itself in an unprecedented situation. There has been a significant error in judgment regarding your departure and the handling of the Neurovance XR patent. I nodded, my expression neutral. I'm glad to hear you're recognizing the mistake. We would like to propose a resolution that recognizes your contributions and secures the future of Neurovance XR with Nexora, Eleanor continued. We understand the situation is complicated, but we're hoping we can find common ground. I didn't speak immediately, letting the silence stretch for a moment. My attorney, Victoria, was sitting next to me, watching the board with a careful, appraising gaze. I was prepared for anything. The offer was outlined clearly. Reinstatement as Executive Vice President of Research and Development, a seat on the board, equity compensation, and a substantial signing bonus. In return, I would transfer the patent rights to Nexora. I took a moment to process the offer. It was generous, but it didn't address the fundamental issues, the lack of respect for my work, the disregard for the process that led to the development of Neurovance XR, and the way they had treated me after all my years of dedication. I glanced at Victoria, who gave me a subtle nod. I turned back to the board. Your offer shows that you now understand my value, I said calmly. But it doesn't address the core issues. I need guarantees of research autonomy and protections against future leadership changes that might affect the integrity of my team and the work we do. The board fell silent, exchanging glances. It was clear they hadn't expected this response. They had thought I would simply accept their terms, grateful to return to the fold. But I wasn't interested in being part of the same broken system that had dismissed me in the first place. Eleanor spoke after a moment. We understand. We will discuss your terms. But I must emphasize that this is a rare opportunity for us to right the wrongs of the past. I nodded. We'll see. What followed was 3 hours of intense negotiations. I pushed for expanded authority over the research division, stronger intellectual property protections, and a guarantee of autonomy from corporate interference. By the end of the meeting, we had crafted an agreement that satisfied all parties. I would return to Nexora with significant power, an equity stake, and protections for my team. The patent for Neurovance XR would be transferred, but with favorable royalty terms for me. The deal wasn't perfect, but it was as close as I was going to get. And more importantly, it gave me leverage that no one had expected me to have. As we prepared to leave, Howard pulled me aside. "You outplayed us all, Claudia," he said, with a mixture of admiration and regret in his voice. "I'm sorry it came to this." "I'm not," I replied honestly. "Sometimes we need to be reminded of our worth." I returned to Nexora the following Monday, walking through the familiar halls with a newfound sense of authority. My team greeted me with smiles and visible relief. James, my senior researcher, had organized a small welcome-back gathering in the main lab. "We knew you'd find a way back," he said, handing me a coffee mug with "The Queen Returns" printed on it. "Not a queen," I replied, taking the mug. "Just a scientist who learned to value herself." As I settled into my new office, a much larger one with a view of the Long Island Sound, I reflected on the journey. I hadn't sought revenge, but I had found justice, securing a future for my team where their contributions would be respected. 6 months later, the Benson Neuroscience Institute opened, a state-of-the-art facility that fostered collaboration and innovation. Howard Jameson, now CEO, joined me for a tour. "You've created something remarkable," he said, "something that will outlast all of us." "The board has learned its lesson," I replied. "Value isn't just in stock prices. It's in the people who do the work." Later, during the opening ceremony, Howard announced the creation of the Institute with guaranteed funding for the next decade. The applause was deafening, but it wasn't just for the building. It was for the legacy we were building. As I looked out over my team, I realized that this was no longer just about business or patents. It was about creating a space where science could thrive and talent could be respected. Caleb Vance, now working in a smaller company, watched from the back of the room. Our eyes met briefly, but I felt no satisfaction. Only appreciation for the journey that had brought me here. The future was mine to shape. 1 year later, the atmosphere at Nexora Therapeutics had completely shifted. The company, once struggling to maintain its place in the industry, was now a leader in innovative neurological treatments, thanks to the success of Neurovance XR and the establishment of the Benson Neuroscience Institute. My decision to take a stand had not only protected my work, but had also transformed the culture at Nexora. No longer was it a place where business and ego trumped scientific progress. It was a company that truly valued its people. The launch party for Neurovance XR was being held at the Stamford Plaza Hotel, and the ballroom was filled with executives, scientists, investors, and medical professionals, all celebrating what had been called the pharmaceutical success story of the decade. I had just delivered a speech about the scientific journey behind Neurovance and its development, and the applause was genuine and sustained. It was surreal to be standing there, knowing how far we'd come. Howard, now permanently reinstated as CEO, took the stage after me. His words echoed through the room. None of this would have been possible without Dr. Claudia Benson. Her scientific brilliance created Neurovance, and her, let's call it, strategic foresight ensured that Neurovance XR would transform millions of lives, while keeping Nexora at the forefront of neurological treatment. The crowd laughed knowingly, their eyes flicking briefly toward me. The story of how I had maneuvered my patent filing had become something of a legend in pharmaceutical circles. It was a cautionary tale for executives and an inspiration for researchers. Howard continued, "The board has unanimously voted to create the Benson Neuroscience Institute, a new division within Nexora dedicated to groundbreaking research with complete scientific autonomy and guaranteed funding for the next decade." The applause that followed was overwhelming, but I didn't feel the need to be front and center. My work had already spoken for itself. The institute, named after me, would carry on for generations, ensuring that research was driven by innovation, not financial interests. As I was invited back to the stage, I felt a surge of emotion. The struggles, the fights, and the sacrifices had all led to this moment. But instead of feeling vindicated, I felt something deeper, a sense of peace, of satisfaction, of knowing that I had stayed true to myself and my work. I had not sought revenge, but I had secured justice. When the toast was raised, I felt surrounded by people who now respected me, not just as a scientist, but as someone who had changed the game. I had become part of a larger movement, one where researchers were given the recognition and respect they deserved, and where companies understood that without true innovation, they were nothing. Later in the evening, I caught sight of Caleb Vance at the back of the room. He was standing by the bar, a tight expression on his face as he watched the proceedings. We locked eyes for a brief moment before he quickly turned away. I felt no satisfaction in seeing him diminished. There was no gloating. His downfall wasn't my victory. What mattered was that I had fought for my place, and in doing so had secured a future not just for me, but for others like me who had been overlooked and underappreciated for far too long. As I looked around at the smiling faces of my team, I realized that this journey wasn't just about business or patents. It was about creating a space where science could thrive, where innovation could be nurtured, and where talent could be respected. The victory wasn't just personal. It was a shift in an entire industry. The Benson Neuroscience Institute had become more than a research facility. It had become a symbol of resilience, of standing up for what you believe in, and of the power of science to change lives. I knew this was only the beginning.